There are moments in life when we feel as though an invisible hand is guiding us, steering us away from the wrong encounter, bringing the right person at the right time, or pulling us back from the edge of a cliff we ourselves could not see. Carl Jung believed that these events are not coincidences, but the movements of the unconscious, the place where the self quietly leads the soul forward. Jung once wrote the immortal line, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." In a noisy world where logic and social conditioning cause us to doubt our own intuition, we forget that there is an ancient wisdom within us, one more powerful than reasoning, whispering directions. Tonight, in this hour of quiet listening, we will explore the subtle yet potent signs that your soul is being guided, not by the outer world, but by the silent teacher within you. Allow your heart to slow down, so that this inner voice may finally be heard. Part 1. The Guardian Angel, through the lens of Jung. When a person experiences a rupture in life, losing direction, losing faith, suffering betrayal, or standing before a choice where neither path is clear, many people say they feel a guardian angel, a strange protection, as if an invisible intelligence is pulling them away from darkness. But Carl Jung would not interpret this angel as a supernatural being descending from the heavens. In his view, the guardian angel is not an external entity, but a psychological manifestation of archetype, especially the self, appearing in a form that the human mind can receive when the ego is too fragile to face the pain. Jung once wrote, "The self is the principle and archetype of orientation and meaning." To him, the self is the center of the entire psychological life, a guiding force existing within the unconscious, regulating, harmonizing, and leading the ego, the conscious self, through the fog-covered territories of human experience. The guardian angel, in Jungian language, is the way the self takes on a friendly, approachable, and understandable form to the conscious mind. When we are weak, when we tremble, when our trust in ourselves falters, the self does not appear as a dry, abstract truth. The self transforms into symbol, a dream, an intuition, a character in the inner imagination, an evocative memory. Jung also said, "Man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious." We can only mature when we listen to the messages from the unconscious, instead of rushing toward the harsh glare of pure intellect. If the guardian angel is not a being out there, then why do so many people see angels, hear angels, or feel protected? Because that angel is the language of the unconscious. In Jungian psychology, when the mind cannot bear a truth, it delivers that truth in symbol. An angel may never speak to us in words, but we can feel its presence in two forms: visual symbols in dreams, intuitive sensation in waking life. Jung affirmed that the unconscious knows far more than what we think we know. He wrote, "There is in the unconscious a superior intelligence which is independent of the conscious mind and is able to influence it." Here lies the essence. We are not only guided from the outside, we are guided from within. The guardian angel is not the universe whispering to us from afar. The guardian angel is the wiser, more evolved version of our own soul, standing just behind the veil of consciousness. When we are deeply wounded, when the ego collapses, when all foundation disappears, that is when we most clearly feel this guidance. It is no coincidence that angels appear strongest during inner crises, because crisis itself is the doorway between consciousness and the unconscious. When we face a moment of darkness, something deep within us, beyond fear, beyond woundedness, begins to speak. It speaks in intuition. It speaks in symbol. It speaks in synchronicity. It speaks in a wordless language that the ego must learn to read. The guardian angel, whether we imagine it as an invisible companion, a protective awareness, or a gentle inner voice, is truly the self, holding the ego so it does not shatter under pain. And this is what Jung wanted us to understand. The self is not something outside. The self is us, but in our most whole, integrated form. Through the archetype of the wise old man, the self appears as ancient wisdom. Through the child, the self appears as pure potential. Through Anima, Animus, the self appears as the principle of balance between the feminine and masculine psyche. And through the image of the guardian angel, the self appears as an inner protector, an inner guide. The guardian angel does not say, "I will lead you."
The guardian angel says, "The wisest part of you will lead you." So the real question is not, is there an angel guiding me, but rather, am I listening? In moments of silence, when all social noise fades, when we no longer perform a role for the world, when we stop trying to control our self-image, we realize the inner calling has never been silent. It has only been waiting for us to be calm enough to hear it. And in that moment, the guardian angel, or more precisely, the self, no longer stands above us, but beside us, walking with us, like a companion who has been there since the beginning. At this point, we can understand the guardian angel in the most Jungian sense, not as an intervention from a supernatural realm, but as the awakening of the true soul, the one who has always known the way, merely waiting for us to pause and recognize it.
If in the previous section we have discovered that the guardian angel is not a celestial being outside of us, but the self, the deep inner intelligence guiding us, then the next natural question becomes, how does the self communicate? How does the deepest voice of the soul reach us when consciousness is too noisy, too busy, too rational? This is the moment we step into part 2. The unconscious as a sacred compass, operating from behind the stage of the psyche. Part 2. The unconscious as a sacred compass. Sigmund Freud saw the unconscious as a machine that buries repressed memories, suppressed desires, and unacceptable fragments of experience. But Jung, he did not view the unconscious as a storage vault of the past, but as a living system, intelligent, purposeful, and capable of evolution.
Jung wrote, "The unconscious is not just evil by nature, it is also the source of the highest good. Not only dark, but also light, not only bestial, semi-human, and demonic, but also superhuman, spiritual, and divine." The unconscious, in Jung's understanding, is the dwelling place of psychological forces that are both wild and sacred, instinctive and mystical, containing both rough impulses and beams of spiritual insight. If the self is the guide, then the unconscious is the living compass of the soul, constantly adjusting our direction so that we move closer to our inner truth. And importantly, the unconscious always compensates for wherever consciousness goes off-center.
When we are too rational, the unconscious sends emotion. When we are too materialistic, the unconscious sends dreams. When we are too controlling, the unconscious sends disruption. When we are too busy, the unconscious sends silence. When we pretend to be strong, the unconscious sends unexpected sadness. This is the compensation mechanism that Jung emphasized. If our conscious mind strays from the axis of the soul, the unconscious will pull us back through signals that we cannot ignore. For example, a person who lives by pure logic, dismisses intuition as vague, and treats emotion as weakness, may suddenly experience an intense dream
or an unexpected emotional opening that softens the heart. A person who represses their shadow, denying instinctual parts of themselves, may encounter threatening figures in dreams, forcing them to face what they have tried to bury.
A person who treats material success as the sole purpose of life may be awakened by a loss that pushes them to seek spiritual meaning. Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." Consciousness looks outward and calls it fate. The unconscious looks inward and calls it direction. The unconscious is the spiritual GPS of the soul, not based on logic, not on reasoning, not on language, but on meaning. It operates according to the gravitational pull of inner truth. And here is the point Jung wanted to emphasize. The unconscious is not the enemy of consciousness, but its silent teacher. The unconscious communicates through many channels. 1. Dreams. Strange dreams with symbols, figures, and scenes appearing for no rational reason often serve as warnings, suggestions, or reminders. 2. Synchronicity. Meaningful coincidences are not accidents, but signals. 3. Emotions. A sudden anxiety, an unexplained sadness, a surge of feeling while hearing music. These are signs of the soul. 4. Intuition. A wordless knowing, understanding something before the mind can explain it. 5. Behavioral impulses. A sudden urge to avoid a path, to leave a relationship, to call someone. The guiding hand of the unconscious. And the astonishing truth is, the unconscious senses when we have drifted away from our center of living. Jung affirmed that the unconscious can perceive the condition of the soul before the conscious mind can. He wrote, "The unconscious has a kind of foresight and seems to anticipate future events. This means the unconscious does not merely react, but predicts, directs, and guides. When a person insists on clinging to logic, trying to control everything through linear thinking, attempting to engineer life purely with cognition, they drift away from the most natural part of their psyche." And the unconscious, like a silent guide, will pull them back through signals that reason cannot bend. Sometimes it comes as disruption, sometimes as loss, sometimes as collapse, sometimes as a sudden encounter, sometimes as a quiet inner knowing, "This is not my path." If part 1 reveals who guides, the self, then part 2 shows how the self guides, through the unconscious, a spiritual navigation system that operates continuously. And when we learn how to listen to the unconscious, we step into a different mode of living, deeper, more authentic, more integrated. We no longer live solely by conscious decision, but by the alignment between consciousness and the unconscious, between the movement of intellect and the heartbeat of the soul. And if in part 2 we see the unconscious as an intelligent system, compensating and recalibrating consciousness like a sacred compass, then the next question arises: how does the unconscious truly communicate with us? It does not speak in logical language. It does not write words on walls. It does not send emails into the mind. It speaks through symbols, through meaningful coincidence, through events that arrive at the exact moment, so precisely that it gives us chills. This is where we enter the concept of synchronicity, one of Jung's most profound contributions to psychological philosophy. Part 3. Synchronicity. When coincidence is no longer coincidence. Carl Jung was the first to introduce the term synchronicity to describe meaningful coincidences, events that occur between the outer world and one's inner state, connected not by cause and effect, but by inner meaning. He defined it as synchronicity is an acausal connecting principle.
It is not the result of A causes B, but of A and B appearing together to reveal a deeper, hidden third meaning. For example, you are thinking about an old friend, and at that exact moment, they send you a message. You are collapsing inside, asking, "What should I do next?" And you encounter a sentence in a book that feels as if it was written specifically for you. You meet someone again by sheer chance, yet they bring advice, direction, or a turning point in your life. These moments carry a very particular sensation. Jung called it numinous, holy, uncanny, revelatory. They make us feel that something beyond logic is operating. This is the difference between random coincidence and meaningful coincidence. In ordinary coincidence, the mind glosses over it. In synchronicity, the soul stops. We do not merely see the event, we feel it. The synchronicity often arrives with sensations of a sudden jolt, the heartbeat slowing, the feeling that something just touched me, a soft awakening, like a reminder that I am being guided.
Jung once said, "We are not only in the world, but the world is in us." Synchronicity is proof that the inner world and the outer world are not separate, but reflect each other as two faces of one spiritual process.
Synchronicity is the signature of the self. In part 1, we spoke of the self as the total wisdom of the soul. In part 2, we saw the self operating through the unconscious to orient us. And here in part 3, synchronicity is the active language of the self within reality. When consciousness refuses to listen to inner guidance, that guidance will appear from the outside. When we ignore intuition, intuition will return as an event. When we refuse to listen to our true nature, life will arrange circumstances to make us hear. Synchronicity is the way the self says to us, "You are on the right path," or "You are drifting away from your center," or "Pay attention, there is something you need to see."
When does synchronicity appear the most? Interestingly, synchronicity does not often appear in times of simplicity, stability, or routine. It arrives in moments of crisis, transition, rupture, doubt, emotional collapse, when the old is falling apart and the new has not yet formed. Jung wrote that the unconscious becomes most active when the ego is weakest, when the walls of reason thin, when we have an opening for the sacred to enter. In other words, synchronicity often appears when the soul is in need of confirmation and guidance.
Synchronicity is not magic. It is the psychology of the soul. What distinguishes Jung from superficial spiritual viewpoints is that he did not regard synchronicity as miracles from outside. Synchronicity is the spiritual science proving that the mind and the physical world are two layers of the same reality. Jung collaborated in researching synchronicity with quantum physicist Wolfgang Pauli, one of the pioneers of non-causal phenomena. The two of them arrived at the conclusion, reality possesses an invisible form of connection, not through causes, but through meaning.
Synchronicity awakens the feeling of being seen. What makes synchronicity so powerful is not the coincidence itself, but the feeling. Something understands me. Something is speaking to me. I am not alone. There is a hand guiding me. It awakens in us the sense of an invisible correspondence between our soul and the flow of the universe. It helps us believe that life is not chaotic, that our choices are not meaningless, that we are stepping into the right chapter of our life, that a deeper order is operating.
When synchronicity happens, What is needed is not explanation, but listening. The thinking mind will want to ask, was this just random? Is this coincidence? Am I imagining significance where there is none? But the soul softly whispers, pay attention, acknowledge it, feel it rather than analyze it. Synchronicity does not ask us to believe, only to remain open. Synchronicity and the individuation journey. In the process of returning to the self, the journey Jung called individuation, synchronicity is one of the most subtle forces that helps us escape the repetitive loops of the ego. It appears as a marker, a reminder, a spark, a doorway, a connecting point, a direction. It is the confirmation there is a larger order operating in your life. And if synchronicity is the signature of the unconscious within physical reality, then how exactly do these signs manifest? How do we recognize them? That is what we will explore in the next section, where the self speaks through numbers, symbols, and repeated images that become impossible to ignore. Part 4. Sign 1. Repeating numbers and recurring symbols. In the spiritual and psychological journey according to Jung, we cannot ignore the role of symbols. To Jung, symbols are not substitutes for words. They are the original language of the unconscious. Jung once said, "The psyche speaks in images." And in our life, one of the symbols that appears most clearly is number, an ancient archetype rooted in the human soul throughout history. When you keep seeing 1111, 333, 222, 555, when feathers appear repeatedly along your path, when butterflies show up and then reappear in your dreams, when the image of the owl, the wolf, the deer keeps returning, that is not the brain playing tricks. That is the unconscious striving to communicate with consciousness using the language of symbol. Numbers as archetypes of meaning. Look deeper. Number 1. Unity, origin, the one source. Number 2. Duality, light and shadow, mind and intuition, masculine and feminine. Number 3. Movement, evolution, transformation. Number 4. Completeness, cosmic structure, the inner mandala of the soul. In Jungian psychology, the number 4 corresponds to the wholeness of the self, the mandala, the complete psychological structure. Jung wrote, "The quaternity is the archetype of wholeness." Therefore, repeating numbers are not mere coincidence. They are the rhythm of the unconscious, the subtle knocking of the self at the door. When symbols come with a sacred feeling, the most important thing is not which number or image you encounter. What matters is the feeling that comes with it. When you see a number and feel nothing, that is just occurrence. But when you see a number and you shiver or pause for a second, or feel as if something is watching you from behind the thin veil, that is the numinous sign. Jung used the word numinous to describe sacred experience, that feeling that is both holy and eerie, intimate yet beyond the ego. A feather falls before you on the very day you feel unprotected. A butterfly appears when you are undergoing inner change. An owl stares at you as if it knows something you have not spoken. A wolf shows up in your dream as a guardian. These are symbols speaking to you. Symbols are mirrors of the soul. Jung believed that symbols do not fall from the sky. Our soul is their source. He once said, "The symbols of the self arise from the depths of the body, just as they do from the depths of the mind." Symbols appear because something inside the soul needs recognition, needs acknowledgement. It is as if the unconscious places a marker on the road you are walking, a silent arrow
pointing the way.
Ignoring symbols equals drying up the inner life. There are people who see 1111 all their life and shake their head with a laugh. Oh, just coincidence. But that is like receiving a letter from your own soul and never opening it. If a person lives only by intellect and surface perception, they are living with a vocabulary of 26 letters, while their unconscious is writing in a far older, richer, more sacred language. Those who ignore symbols often feel their life as dry, flat, lacking meaning, without depth. Meanwhile, those who listen to symbols step into a different kind of life, where everything carries significance, everything is connected, and wisdom flows beneath the surface of the soul.
Symbols guide us back to the parts of ourselves we abandoned. When we encounter recurring symbols, it is a reminder of something within us that has been neglected. Creativity, intuition, sensitivity, spiritual femininity or masculinity, a buried talent, an inner calling, a pure dream, a true part of ourselves we suppressed in order to fit in. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Symbols are the first step that allow us to begin seeing the unconscious.
Listening with the soul, not with logic.
When 1111 appears, pause. When a symbol repeats, observe the feeling in your body. When an animal, an image, a dream returns, ask yourself, what part of me is trying to speak? What inside me is coming back to life? What have I forgotten about myself? Because symbols are the hand of the unconscious, reaching out and waiting for consciousness to take it. And if symbols are seen by the eye, numbers perceived by awareness, then there is yet another channel of communication, one that does not operate through the senses, not through imagery, but through the quiet calling of the soul. That is intuition, which Jung regarded as the secret voice of the self. Part 5. Dreams with mysterious, luminous, or sacred figures. Carl Jung regarded dreams not as dull products of imagination, but as direct messages from the unconscious. He wrote, "The dream is a little hidden door in the innermost and most secret recesses of the psyche." A dream is a small doorway leading us into the most secret chamber of the inner world. Within that dream space, we meet figures that the rational mind could never create. They are not memories, not imagination, not leftover fragments of daytime impressions. They are archetypes stepping onto the stage of the soul. When a figure in a dream is not someone, but a spiritual pattern. There are dreams in which you see an old gentle man with eyes deep as an ancient lake. This is the wise old man, the archetype of inner wisdom. A radiant child with shining eyes, embodiment of purity and untouched potential. This is the child archetype. A mysterious woman, perhaps unlike anyone you've ever met, carrying a beauty as if from another lifetime. This may be the Anima. Or a man appears in your dream, strong, composed, precise like an inner logic. This is the Animus. And sometimes, there appears a figure that is neither male nor female, not even exactly human, but rather a form of conscious light. This is the self, the ultimate center of the soul. In such moments, you do not need to ask, "Who is this being?" Because you already know, not by mind, but by recognition. You perceive them not by words, but by sensation.
Such dream figures often bring a particular state of feeling, a sense of awe, a sense of being seen through, a sense of deep peace, a sense of a greater presence. This is the sign. This is not a random character. This is a messenger. Carl Jung once said, "In each of us there is another whom we do not know, and that other often comes to us in dreams."
Dreams are not illusions. Dreams are dialogues. What Jung emphasized most: do not merely observe the dream, dialogue with the dream. Jung developed a method called active imagination, where one sits quietly, relaxes, and speaks with dream figures as though speaking to living beings. You are not speaking to the old man in the dream. You are speaking to wisdom within you. You are not speaking to the radiant child. You are speaking to innocence within you. You are not speaking to the strange woman. You are speaking to the feminine intuition within you. You are not speaking to the powerful man in the dream. You are speaking to the spiritual masculine within you. You are not speaking to an unknown light. You are speaking to the self, the center of your soul. Dream figures come to guide, not to decorate. Dream figures are not random visual ornaments created by the mind. They come with a very specific role. Reminder, signal giver, protector, orienter, illuminator, awakener. Jung believed that when an archetype appears in a dream, it is because a part of us is ready to be seen, ready to be lived again. A dream is the stage upon which the unconscious performs, and every figure is a fragment of the soul wearing a face. Ignoring dreams equals ignoring the most precious messages of the soul. Some people wake and say, "Oh, it was just a meaningless dream." But dreams are never meaningless. Meanwhile, others awaken and know they have received something sacred, a warning, a direction, a comfort, a letter sent from the self. A single dream can begin a new chapter of life. Consider this. A person dreams of a figure saying to them, "It is time to leave." And then they find the courage to step out of a toxic relationship. A person dreams of a radiant child and realizes they have been suffocating their own creativity for too long. A person dreams of a silent, wise elder and begins a path of spiritual learning. Someone dreams of death and understands that what must die is the old ego, not the body. Dreams have the power to transform real life. And while dreams speak the language of imagery, intuition speaks the language of direct knowing, knowledge without reasoning. In the next section, we will enter one of the clearest signs of inner guidance, the secret voice from within, which Jung called intuition as perception via the unconscious. Part 6, Sign 3. Intuition and the inner voice that cannot be ignored. In Jungian psychology, intuition is not a vague emotional hunch. Intuition is perception that pierces through rationality. Jung defined it. Intuition is perception via the unconscious. Intuition is perception through the unconscious. What does this mean? It means there are things we know, but not by thinking, not by analysis, not by data processing, not by logic, but by knowing naturally, like a light switching on inside. You don't think, "Should I turn left?" You just know you must turn left. You don't think, "Is this person good or bad?" You feel their energy. You don't analyze,
Should I go to this meeting? Something inside whispers, don't go. That is the unconscious speaking.
When the self sends messages through knowing. In Jung's theory, the self does not speak only through dreams and synchronicity, but also through intuition, that wordless voice inside the mind. Many people have experienced moments of, I don't know how I know, but I know. I suddenly feel something is off. I suddenly feel I must do this. There is no evidence, but there is a strong knowing. That is the self guiding. Often this voice feels as if it comes from someone else, a calm voice, a warm voice, a steady voice. Jung explained, this may be the Anima, Animus, the archetype of spiritual gender, speaking on behalf of the unconscious. If you are male, the intuitive voice may feel feminine, deep, soft, receptive, Anima. If you are female, the voice may feel masculine, strong, clear, logical, Animus. Because Anima/Animus is the bridge between consciousness and the unconscious,
Intuition is strongest when the mind is silent. Intuition cannot enter a noisy mind. It needs space. It needs stillness. It needs slower breath. It needs a return to the inner world. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." Intuition is the process of looking inward. When we are silent, truly silent, we will hear that voice more clearly. When the body relaxes, when the heart steadies, when the mind opens, intuition arrives like a guest who sits beside us and says, "This is the direction. This is what you have always known, but have not yet dared to believe. This is what you must do, even if others don't understand."
To dismiss intuition equals to lose the inner compass.
Modern society worships rationality. Decisions must be justified with data. Opinions must be supported by argument. Actions must be logically coherent. Emotion is labeled weakness. Intuition is labeled unscientific. But Jung warned, when we live only by rationality, we sever the channel to the soul. We become beings who manage life with the head rather than live life with our whole being. A highly rational person may succeed, but often feels burnt out, directionless, drained, uninspired, disconnected from their essence. Intuition is the spiritual energy flowing through us. It is not mystical, it is vital force. Intuition carries an older memory than the mind. The mind knows only what it has learned, but the unconscious knows what it has lived. Across personal memory, ancestral memory, collective human memory, spiritual lineage memory, archetypal memory. Jung called this the collective unconscious. Within it resides a timeless intelligence. So there are moments when you know something, but the knowledge you possess cannot justify it. You know because your soul resonates with a greater truth.
Strengthening intuition is not magic, but returning to oneself.
Intuition is not a supernatural gift for the few. Everyone has intuition. Not everyone listens. Intuition grows stronger when we spend time alone, walk in nature, meditate, journal, observe the body, notice deep reactions, record dreams, track symbols, live honestly with emotions. The more we connect with our essence, the clearer intuition becomes, like a stream of quiet wisdom.
Intuition is not emotion. Intuition is perception. Emotion can be distorted by fear, hurt, expectation. But intuition does not fabricate narratives. Intuition does not argue.
Intuition simply knows. Jung emphasized that intuition operates as an independent perceptive organ in the human psyche, like sight or hearing. Intuition is the third eye of the soul, perceiving not surfaces, but the energetic field of truth.
Intuition is always correct, but we are not always brave enough to listen. Often intuition speaks first, and the mind arrives later to contradict, question, dismiss. Intuition says, "Don't trust this person." The mind answers, "But they seem so kind." Intuition says, "Don't take that path." The mind answers, "But it's the safe option." Intuition says, "Something is wrong." The mind answers, "Don't overthink this." But eventually, we always come back to intuition and say, "I knew it."
Intuition is the self holding our hand in silence. The inner voice does not need to defeat logic, does not need to prove itself, does not need to argue. It only needs our trust. Intuition is the self in its softest form, guiding us, protecting us, reminding us of the path that belongs to us.
And while intuition speaks with the voice of the soul, emotion speaks with the voice of the body. In the next part, we will explore another miraculous form of inner guidance. Those sudden waves of emotion that arise seemingly without cause, not as irrational disruptions, but as deep messages from the unconscious. Part 7. Surges of emotion within silence and sacred space. There are moments when you are sitting alone. Nothing sad is happening, nothing worth crying about. Everything is fine by rational measures. And yet, tears suddenly flow. Not because of the story, but because some deep sensing touches the center of your soul. There are times when you walk in the forest, and suddenly your chest tightens before the beauty of the light passing through leaves. There are times when you enter an empty church, and the holy stillness softens your heart. There are times when you hear a piece of music and feel as though someone is calling your name through the sound.
There are times when you stand in nature and the feeling of belonging brings tears to your eyes. Carl Jung called these numinous experiences, experiences that are sacred beyond the mind's ability to explain. He said, "A numinous experience touches the deepest layers of the human psyche. This is not ordinary emotion. It is a touch into the depths of the soul."
When the ego is touched by something larger than itself. Jung believed that the ego is the center of consciousness, but not the center of the entire human being. When the ego encounters a force larger than itself, the self, it experiences a kind of inner trembling. Those tears are not from suffering, but from being seen. That tightness is not from pain, but from being touched. That sensation is not weakness, but an opening. In that moment, the ego steps aside, and the soul steps forward.
Moments that cannot be explained. You cannot explain, why am I crying? Why am I trembling? Why is my heart wavering? Because that is not the reaction of the mind, but the reaction of the soul. Jung once said, "There are moments in life when the soul takes over and the ego must step aside." These are moments when we no longer control emotion, because that emotion does not arise from the shallow layer. It comes from a deeper realm, where the self whispers, "You are on the right path. You have opened. You are awakening a part of yourself."
Sacred spaces allow the soul to speak.
Interestingly, these waves of emotion rarely happen in loud places, but in places of stillness. Deep in the forest, inside an empty church, in a quiet bedroom, atop a mountain, by a still lake, in darkness, in the silent pause between musical notes. Where consciousness loosens, the unconscious rises. Where the ego shrinks, the self expands. Where words are silent, feeling becomes language.
Emotional surges are not dysfunction. They are inner signals. In modern society, people often rush to say, "Oh, I'm too sensitive. Oh, I'm weak. Oh, I cry too easily." But from Jung's perspective, this is a sign of spiritual sensitivity. Such a soul can feel reality more deeply, not just see, but perceive, not just hear, but receive. Our task is to stay, not to run.
When a surge of emotion arrives, many people immediately suppress, hold their breath, distract themselves, shift attention elsewhere. But Jung reminded us, feelings are not to be suppressed, but to be listened to. These emotions do not come to disturb, but to communicate. Our task is not to close the door, but to welcome them.
Stay with the feeling, to hear what the soul is saying. Try this in such a moment. Do not analyze. Do not judge. Do not rationalize. Do not resist. Simply remain. Ask yourself, what is this feeling leading me toward? What part of me has just been touched? What inside me is awakening? When the self communicates through the body. Here is a crucial point. The self does not only speak through the mind, it speaks through the body. You feel tension in the throat. That is something unspoken. You feel heaviness in the chest. That is something unreleased. You feel a tightening in the stomach. That is something unresolved. You feel warmth in the heart. That is something being reborn. The body does not lie. The body is the loudspeaker of the unconscious. Tears as purification. Some tears do not belong to sadness, but to release. Not to suffering, but to cleansing. Not to defeat, but to recognition. These tears say, you are returning. You are softening. You are becoming more real.
A deeper life begins with the ability to feel. Jung once said, "Emotions are the chief source of becoming conscious. Those who do not allow themselves to feel can never truly know themselves. Those who do not feel cannot descend into depth. Those who do not cry cannot heal." These emotional surges are doorways back to the self, moments when the soul surfaces into the visible world. And if emotion is the wave from within, then sometimes the unconscious protects us from the outside as a mysterious guiding force in reality. In the next part, we will explore another important sign of guidance, the strange feeling that one is being protected in dangerous situations. Part 8. The strange feeling of being protected in dangerous situations. There are moments when you are walking down a street and suddenly feel that you must stop, even though there is no obvious reason.
You slow down for a few seconds, then right ahead, something falls. A car rushes through, an incident unfolds. There are times when you intend to take a certain path, and at the last moment, you change direction. Later, you discover that your original route would have led you towards something bad, an accident, a confrontation, a conflict. There are moments when you were about to join a meeting, but your body retracts, feeling unsafe, not in the sense of social discomfort, but in the sense of do not be there. There are times when you were about to step into a relationship, and something inside you whispers, no, don't do it. Not ordinary hesitation, but a force holding you back. Carl Jung called this the activation of a protective archetype within the unconscious. Jung believed that the unconscious has the ability to read subtle signals from the environment that the conscious mind does not detect. He said, "The unconscious sees far more than the conscious mind. The unconscious senses before the conscious mind understands. The conscious mind only registers the obvious, light, sound, movement, information. But the unconscious reads the energetic frequency of the environment, senses the intentions of others, detects danger in the situation, decodes micro-expressions on faces, responds to subtle atmospheric changes, recognizes something off before the brain can process it. When the unconscious detects danger, it sends signals through the body. A slight ache, a tightening in the chest, a chill down the spine, a brief dizziness, a prickling warning in the belly, a feeling that something isn't right. Intuition says, don't go, don't trust, don't get close, step aside. And if we listen, we escape the danger. If we ignore, consequences often appear shortly after.
Protection happens not only for the body, but for the soul. There are times when you are saved from physical harm, collisions, falling objects, physical danger. But there are also times when you are lifted away from a toxic relationship. You avoid a deceitful person. You are kept from making a wrong decision. You are preserved from playing a false role. You are prevented from entering a soul-decaying environment. Jung believed that this protection does not exist merely to keep the body alive, but to preserve the integrity of the soul. Many people have said, "It's a good thing I didn't accept that invitation. It's a good thing I never met that person. It's a good thing I was late that day. It's a good thing I listened to that feeling in my chest." And then they realize they escaped something more dangerous than physical death. They escaped soul loss.
Synchronicity as the intervention of the self. Sometimes protection does not arrive through intuition, but through synchronicity. A phone call makes you miss a trip. A delayed email stops you from attending a meeting. A small inconvenience keeps you from an accident. An annoying delay, which later turns out to have saved you. You slow down to tie your shoelace and avoid disaster. You turn back to get your wallet and miss a collision. You take the wrong turn, and that mistake protects you. Jung once said, "There is no such thing as coincidence. There is no such thing as random. Only events arranged by a deeper intelligence."
The guardian is not always a figure, but a force.
The guardian is not only a character in a dream. Sometimes the guardian is a strong inner feeling, an inexplicable aversion, a sense of, "I cannot enter this place," a warning voice, a strange delay, a sensation pulling you away. The guardian is not necessarily a winged angel. The guardian may be the self itself in its protective manifestation. Trust the guidance instead of resisting it. There are people who always ignore intuition. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe I'm imagining things. Maybe I'm worrying too much. Come on, don't be superstitious. But there are others who learn to trust the signal. Today I shouldn't take that road. I shouldn't trust this person. I should stay away from this situation. I need to pay attention to this feeling. Both kinds of people live, but the second kind escapes much suffering.
This is not luck. It is cooperation between consciousness and the unconscious.
The conscious hears, the unconscious warns. The conscious responds, the unconscious guides. The conscious avoids, the unconscious rejoices. It is the dance between the part we know and the part we do not know. Jung once said, "The unconscious is our greatest friend and protector. When we trust it, it leads us away from what is not meant for us. When we ignore it, we learn through pain." When the soul guides the safe path, eventually, someone who has lived long enough with protective intuition will acknowledge a simple truth.
I have been protected more times than I will ever know. And the beautiful thing is, you do not need to know who protected you. Only that some part of you, larger than the ego, has always been there, has always guided you. And if protection sometimes arrives through silence and intuition, there are also times when guidance arrives through people, those who step into our lives as if carrying a message. That is another subtle sign, meeting the right person at the right time. Part 9. Meeting someone who says exactly what you needed to hear. There are moments when you are hurting inside, and suddenly a stranger says something that feels like they see right through you. It's going to be okay. This was never your fault.
There are times you are uncertain about the direction of your life, and a taxi driver simply tells you, "Don't choose what is safe, choose what is true for you." You randomly come across an online comment. "You have endured long enough. It is time to free yourself." You sit on a park bench, and an old man smiles and says, "You don't have to be strong all the time." No one knows what you're going through, yet those words feel as though they were sent specifically for you. Carl Jung once said, "What we encounter in others is often something we need to see in ourselves." Meeting others is often encountering the part of ourselves we have not yet recognized.
Projection. When we see the archetype through the person in front of us. Jung called this projection. When we meet someone, we do not only see them through the eyes, but through the psyche. The person we treat as a mentor, we are projecting the wise old man archetype. The person we seek comfort from, we are projecting the mother archetype. The person who inspires our creativity, we are projecting Anima, Animus. The person we see as strong and authoritative, we are projecting the father. The person who irritates us deeply is reflecting our own shadow archetypes, our timeless forms of the soul. And we wear different lenses when we look at different people. But here is the astonishing part. Sometimes the self uses projection as a communication channel.
When the self uses another person's mouth to speak to us. There are things we cannot say to ourselves. We don't dare. We aren't honest enough. We aren't brave enough. We don't yet love ourselves enough. So the self sends a messenger, and they speak the words we have been waiting to hear. There are sentences that arrive at the exact moment when we are about to give up, when we are about to make a mistake, when we are about to return to an old pattern, when we are standing at a crossroads. Jung said, "The right person at the right time is a messenger of the self."
Synchronicity. Meeting the right person at the right moment. This is not just a random encounter. This is synchronicity, meaningful coincidence. It seems accidental, but feels orchestrated. You run into an old friend after years apart, right when you need advice. A waiter says something that gently touches your buried wound. A child looks at you and speaks an innocent sentence that penetrates deeper than any therapy. A stranger asks, "Are you all right?" At the very moment you are not. Coincidence, or the universe sending a message?
Angel in disguise, the messenger wearing ordinary skin. The one who brings the message is not always gentle. Sometimes the guardian appears as someone bluntly critical, someone who makes you uncomfortable, someone harsh, someone who forces you to confront the truth, someone you dislike seeing, yet you cannot ignore their words. Because sometimes the soul needs an uncomfortable truth. Someone looks into your eyes and says, "You are lying to yourself." Someone says, "That person doesn't love you. You love the version you invented of them." Someone tells you, "You were not born to live someone else's life." Those words may hurt, but they liberate you.
Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious."
The messengers often appear only once. Here's the strange thing. They appear, deliver the message, and vanish from your life. No more contact, no return, no becoming close friends, no becoming lifelong companions. They are more like a doorway to a lesson, not a relationship. Have you recognized them? You may have met a teacher you had just one session with, a friend who said only one sentence and you never met again, a stranger on a night train, a doctor who spoke one line that shifted your inner world, a random seatmate on an airplane, a child who said something that seemed silly on the surface, but your heart knew that sentence was meant for me. Messages do not come only from the kind, but from every kind of person. They may appear in the form of the wise, the rough, the compassionate, the stern, the innocent, the irritating, the mundane. And each of these forms holds a different archetype. How to live in a way that allows you to hear the messages. Instead of asking, "Why did this person say that to me?" ask, "Why did I need to hear that?" Instead of asking, "What do they think about me?" ask, "What part of me is being awakened?" Instead of reacting defensively, "They're wrong," try asking, "What shadow in me did their words touch?" Because, as Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Everything that disturbs us in another is a door into our own truth. Part 10. Dark Night of the Soul, the spiritual night as an initiation. There are moments in life when everything seems to collapse. Relationships shatter, meaning dissolves, goals lose their purpose, old beliefs no longer work. You look in the mirror and no longer recognize yourself. You feel empty, exhausted, directionless, detached from the world, not because the outside has changed, but because something inside you is being reorganized. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. There is no awakening without suffering." This is not a breakdown. This is a rite of transformation. In the dark night of the soul, the old structure of the ego is dismantled. The ego cracks. The persona, the social mask, dissolves. The shadow rises. False values die. You think you are losing everything, but in truth, you are being freed from everything that is not truly you. Jung described this process with the words, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. One does not become awakened by imagining light, but by bringing darkness into awareness." The darkness is not an enemy, it is a teacher. During this time, every part of you that you once rejected begins to appear. Fear, woundedness, feelings of inadequacy, weakness, doubt, suppressed desires, childlike vulnerability, hunger for love, buried pain. Not to torment you, but to be acknowledged, to be held, to be integrated. The old ego must die, so the true self can be born. You once defined yourself through, "I must be a good person. I must always be strong. I must make others happy. I must not fail. I must be perfect." These were once the rules of your existence. Now they collapse, and in their place comes, "I am human. I am enough even when I am not okay. I am allowed to be tired. I am allowed to not know. I am allowed to change. I am allowed to fail.
This is a rebirth from within.
At this stage, the guardian does not cradle, but leads you into the abyss. In the Jungian journey, at this time, the guardian does not appear as gentle daylight, no longer as a tender angel, no longer as a hand holding you. The guardian leads you into the depths, not to abandon you there, but so that the false may die first, and the real may be born. This is a fierce kind of protection. This is the self's deep love for truth.
The dark night is also the longest night, before dawn. In the loneliest moment, you feel as if you have been abandoned, but in truth, you have just returned to yourself. No more noise from outside, no more distraction, no more opinions of others, only the self in dialogue with you. Jung once said, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing which makes my life worth living." Solitude becomes sacred if you dare to stay in the dark night. Many try to escape. Distraction, burying themselves in work, emotional addiction, dopamine addiction, staying busy, rushing into new relationships, running back to old patterns, filling the silence with noise. But Jung invites us to stay. Write, dream, reflect, ask questions, observe, without judgment, without running. If you dare to stay, if you walk through the night, the person who emerges the next morning is no longer the one who entered. After the darkness, a new ego. You are no longer afraid of loneliness because you have met yourself. You no longer cling to others because you have found your inner anchor. You no longer wear masks because you have tasted the sweetness of authenticity. You are no longer controlled by the past because you have made peace with it. You no longer fear the future because you stand firmly within yourself. The dark night is not an ending, but an initiation. This is not collapse. This is initiation. This is the ritual the soul uses to move you into a new stage of being. Not everyone goes through the dark night, but those who do become deeper, quieter, truer, freer, less artificial, less afraid. And when this new self is born from the darkness, a profound realization arises that the guiding force does not reside outside, but at the center of the soul itself. This is where we arrive at the ultimate archetype, the self, the God within. Part 11. The Self Archetype. The God within and the source of all sacred messages. Carl Jung believed that the self is the most fundamental archetype of the entire psyche. The self is not merely a part of the mind. The self is the structure that encompasses the entire mind. Jung called the self the principle and archetype of orientation and meaning. The self is the principle and pattern of direction and meaning. If the ego is the pilot, then the self is the sky and the gravitational field guiding the flight. We once thought that voice came from outside, but in truth, it comes from within. When we say, "There's something guiding me, an invisible hand is steering me in the right direction. Someone is speaking to me. There is a force observing me," we think it is the voice of the universe, the voice of ancestral spirits, the voice of angels, the voice of the metaphysical world. But through Jung's lens, all of those messages come from the self. The self uses dreams, intuition, synchronicity, symbols, emotions, the body, fated encounters, periods of solitude, recurring inner signals
to communicate with us.
The self speaks in images, because the ego cannot yet bear direct truth.
Jung explained that the ego, the conscious part, is fragile. It protects itself with logic, with reasoning, with belief systems. If the self were to speak directly, you are living a life that is not yours. You are loving someone who does not belong in your story. You are betraying your true self. You are running from the truth. The ego would collapse instantly. Therefore, the self speaks in symbols. A dream of a blocked road, a light at the end of an alley, a glowing child leading you, an old man turning back to look at you, a wolf, a bridge, a closed door, a death in a dream, an unexplored forest, a mandala circle. The self uses imagery as language because imagery bypasses logic and touches the soul directly. Jung wrote, "The psyche speaks in images and symbols."
Mandala, the sacred geometry of the self.
Over years of study, Jung observed that when a person enters a deep inner transformation, the self often expresses itself through a mandala. A mandala is a circle, perfect symmetry, a clear center, a rotation, a point of convergence. Jung said that the mandala appears as a symbol of spiritual order when the soul is gathering its fragments back to the center. The mandala is like the map of the self.
The self is the center, and also the totality. In Jung's psychological framework, ego is the center of the conscious mind. Persona is the social mask. Shadow is the rejected part. Anima, animus is the inner gendered archetype. The unconscious is the vast unseen. But the self is the center of the whole system and also the circle that encompasses the entire system. The self is both the nucleus and the universe.
The guardian angel is only the interface. The self is the true source. When we feel protected, guided, awakened, reminded, we think there is a guardian angel, a being intervening from above. But to Jung, the guardian angel is a representative form, a familiar face, a friendly interface through which the self communicates with the ego. The guardian is the messenger. The self is the author. The guardian is the phone. The self is the one sending the message.
The self never forces. It nudges, invites, and touches. The self does not command. The self does not shout. The self does not impose. The self speaks through invitation. Look here. Return to yourself. Something is missing. Something is not true. Something has not yet been lived. The self uses signs, not pressure.
Awakening is a return, not a search outward. Jung wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes."
We spend our lives searching for gods outside, for power outside, for answers in others, for identity in society. But the true journey begins when we turn inward.
The self cannot be found outside, because the self is our essence. The self is not a God out there. The self is the God within. The self is the seed of divinity in every human being. Some call the self the soul, the inner divinity, the ancient wisdom, universal guidance, the voice of God inside, the incorruptible essence, the part of us that knows. Whatever the name, the self is always there, silent, patient, unjudging, waiting for our return.
And when we realize that all guidance originates from the God within, our way of living naturally transforms. We seek fewer signs outside and begin forming a life built on inner listening. This leads us to the final sign: active imagination and a life continually open to the messages of the inner world. Part 12. Active imagination and a life that listens. Active imagination, according to Jung, is the method that allows the ego to speak directly with the unconscious. This is not casual daydreaming, nor mere mental fantasy, but a conscious ritual of contact with the deepest regions of the soul. Jung wrote, "Active imagination is the attempt to give voice to the unconscious."
A descent into the inner landscape. Imagine this. You sit quietly in a place of stillness. You relax your breath. You close your eyes. Before you lies not darkness, but the door of the inner world. You may begin with an image from a dream, a room, a forest, a river, a stranger, a scene, a symbol, a light. You do not force it to become anything. You do not control it. You do not rush the process. You allow the image to live, to unfold, to develop, to reveal itself. And then it responds. Not in ordinary language, but through intuition, emotion, and the speech of the soul, meeting the angel in this realm.
In active imagination, many encounter sacred figures. A wise old man, a radiant child, a guiding spirit, a mysterious woman, a luminous presence, a silent watcher, or a nameless stream of light. When we are still early in the inner journey, these figures may appear as guardians outside ourselves, as guides walking ahead.
The guardian changes as we change. In the beginning, the guardian is a rescuer, a force pulling us away from danger, from the wrong path. Later, in the deeper phase, the guardian becomes the stern teacher, not soothing us, not comforting us, but requiring that we face our inner darkness. Then in the most mature stage, the guardian withdraws, and we begin to live from the center of the self. No more images outside of us, no more guides above us, no more light from elsewhere, because the self has become the core of our awareness. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are."
Living in a state of being guided. To live under the guidance of the self is not to constantly seek signs from outside. On the contrary, it's a way of being in ongoing intimacy with the inner world. To live guided means
Seeing life symbolically. You do not only see objects,
you see meaning. You do not only see color, you see message. You do not only see events, you see their symbolic nature.
practicing rituals of inner listening. Each person will have their own doorway into the unconscious. Journaling, recording dreams, meditation, walking in silence, drawing, listening to music, gazing at the sky, or simply sitting in stillness. These are the bridges through which the unconscious steps into consciousness.
Trusting and acting on intuition. You stop ignoring your inner warning. You stop dismissing the feeling of something is off. You stop twisting logic to override emotional truth. You learn to trust a deeper wisdom, letting the message not only be heard, but lived. There are those who receive signs, but do not act upon them. Those who understand the message, but do not embody it. When we truly live in self-guidance, the inner messages are not merely heard, they are incarnated into choices. We stop looking for a guardian. We become a channel of the self. At a certain point, we realize the guardian angel was never outside us. It is the deepest layer of the soul. It is the self. It is the God within. You no longer wait for miracles. You are the miracle. You no longer wait for direction. You are the direction. You no longer wait for the voice. You are the voice.
Active imagination as a lifelong practice. Active imagination is not a meditation technique, not a psychological exercise, not a spiritual ritual. It is a way of living, a presence, an openness, a perpetual receptivity to the self. You carry it with you into everything, speaking with someone, standing in a crowd, being alone at night, facing a decision, revisiting a memory, thinking of the future. You live in dialogue with the self.
By then, life itself becomes a conversation with the soul. You begin to know when the self is speaking. You recognize that voice. You feel its accuracy. You sense its lightness. You know it is a wisdom that does not come from thinking. And perhaps, at some point, you will say, I no longer seek guidance, because I have become the place from which the guidance speaks.
And here, the circle closes. From guardian angel to intuition, to synchronicity, to the dark night, to the self, and finally, to a life lived in direct conversation with the self. The journey is not to become supernatural, but to become human in the deepest sense of the word. If what you have heard today has touched something inside you, you may stay with us, not as a viewer, but as a fellow traveler. You may subscribe so that each week we can sit together, breathe slowly, and listen to the messages rising from within. If you have personal experiences of intuition, dreams, synchronicity, or a moment of your own dark night, you may share them in the comments. Here, no one is judged. Each of us is an unfolding story, and perhaps your experience will be the light that helps someone else cross their darkness. See you in the next sitting, as we continue the journey back to ourselves. May you sleep in peace and rest in an inner calm.